Cursor just launched something that will change the way how AI assistants work. No, I'm not talking about Composer 3 or Grok 4.6. It is their new model router. At first, I thought it is just another model router, something like openrouter's auto router, but after reading their engineering blog, I realized they are doing something much bigger. Because this is not just about picking the smartest or cheapest model anymore. It is about using everything Cursor knows about your coding session to make better decisions. So now let's go through their blog and understand what they have built and how it is different from traditional model routers like openrouter and how it can benefit us. If that sounds interesting, don't forget to subscribe my channel, and without delaying any further, let's get started. Okay, I have opened the Cursor router launch blog here. Initially, they mentioned that Cursor router lets team automatically route every request to the most capable model for the task, delivering frontier level intelligence at a lower cost. So this is something that we have seen that a lot of people are trying to achieve, especially now with the model prices getting higher and higher. For enterprises, this actually becomes a very big problem. And then they mentioned that during our early experience with dozens of enterprises, customer got frontier level performance at approximately 30 to 50% lower cost, which is very good if you think in a large scale. This will actually significantly reduce the total cost. Now let's take a look at this diagram. So here we can see the comparison of their multiple modes. One thing that is very interesting here is the intelligence mode in Cursor router actually does 60% saving than Fable 5 High, which also gets a similar sort of performance, which is a drastic reduction in the total cost. Also, if you compare the balance mode with Opus 4.8, it does 36% of saving, and it is almost similar to GPT 5.6 Solve, which also does really well. So this actually gives you a better idea about the Cursor router, how these modes are useful for you, and based on your task, you can actually change mode so you can reduce the cost and without negotiating the quality of the code that it is producing. Because let's be honest, for all tasks, we don't need Claude Fable 5 or GPT 5.6 Tera models. We can do a lot of simpler tasks with smaller models. So this is what this model router is trying to achieve. As I was discussing, with Cursor router, our goal is to provide teams with the best performance and experience for every task without spending more than the work requires, which is something everyone is trying to optimize, right? And I believe with the training data Cursor has, they will implement it much better. Now let's go into the other sections. As well predicted, roughly 60% of the developers using Cursor pick a single model as their daily driver. And to be very honest, I am one of them. If I start a session with Claude Fable 5, I intend to end the whole event. I intend to complete the whole session using Fable 5. Similarly, for GPT 5.6 or Grok 4.8, whenever I start a conversation with this model, I don't switch between models, and I feel a lot of developers like me, as the data also shows, does the same thing. And because of that, the AI spending grows much faster than the output quality. And the Cursor router actually fixes that by classifying each request before a model runs. And at its core, Cursor router is a classifier that routes user to the best model based on their query. And here is the training part that I was mentioning before. So they have trained the Cursor router on 600,000 plus live requests and evaluated the performance in an online A/B test across millions of live requests directed by Cursor router. So I guess most of this data came from the auto mode that we used to use in Cursor, and they have used that to do the online A/B test. And here they mentioned that the Cursor router analyzed each request on query, context, task complexity, domain, combined with what we know about each model's behavior. This is something very interesting because every model has their own taste, and understanding the model's behavior actually makes a lot of difference. And then they are clubbing it with query, context, task complexity, and domain, because Cursor already has the context of your code base, the conversation, the context, the task that you are giving. So the routing becomes much performant. Then they mentioned that they learn what each model is best at, and route to the most efficient option. Simple work goes to the most price efficient models. UI updates goes to the model with the base test, because you all know that for the longest time OpenAI models were not that good at UI. So for example, I am trying to do something with the UI, the request will then redirect to somewhat like Claude, Opus 4.8 or somewhat similar to that. And for more complex and long horizon problems, go to the frontier reasoning models. Now let's see the modes of cursor router. As I was discussing earlier, cursor router has three modes: intelligence, balance, and cost, which you can then adjust based on your requirements. As you have seen the diagram before, the auto intelligence mode lands near Fable 5 on user satisfaction of output at about 60% lower cost for teams, which actually shows that how efficient their model router is. Similarly, the auto balance lands over Opus 4.5. So we have already covered that before. So let's just see the next part. In terms of quality of output, they measured the user satisfaction and the keep rate. Basically, what they did was, if you are moving to a next feature after a feature is implemented with the auto mode, that is a great positive signal for the router. And if it is not going forward with the next feature, it is actually a negative feedback. So this is how they have created their evaluations, which is very interesting. And then they have this keep rate on how much the agent generated code remains in the code base over time. And they have relied on these metrics to evaluate every model launch and harness improvements for the NAS. And they have relied on these matrices and evaluated every model launch and harness improvement in the last 9 months. And we have also seen that, okay, a lot of models don't do that well on other harnesses, but with cursor harnesses, the cost effectiveness and improvements were much better. And I have been seeing this for a while, that the cursor harness is actually much better, and it is pretty dynamic based on the wide range of model that it supports. And here they have shown some data from enterprise customer that use the early access period of cursor router. So we can see that they got 52% cost saving versus all Opus 4.8. Some got 31%, a few got 32% as well. And here they mention that cost per request is only the half of the story, which is very interesting. Engineering leaders care where those savings show up in real shift work. So we looked at cost per commit and the pattern held. This is very interesting because a lot of time we do measure these things based on, okay, one request, one response, but the overall ROI of a generated code is not on each request, right? Sometimes we need to do multiple prompts to get one thing shipped, right? So I think this is very interesting to measure the ROI based on per commit. So this actually makes a lot of sense, but it's pretty interesting to see as well. And they have observed that the cursor router had lower cost per commit of $6.76 for intelligence mode and $4.63 for balance mode. GPT 5.6 matched the cost of intelligence but had lower user satisfaction with the output. Meanwhile, Fable 5 Opus 4.0 had produced commit at a cost premium to cursor at $12.69 and $7.34 respectively. We can see the Fable 5 cost per commit is highest. Then we have Opus 4.8, GPT 5.6 fall, then the intelligence mode of cursor and balance, then Grok 4.5 and Composer 2.5, which is actually very interesting. And now if the model keeps getting better and better, I feel the cost will drastically reduce even more and the performance will grow as well. So now how you can use it? You can go to the auto mode in the model picker, choose from 3 optimization modes that move along with your frontier. So intelligence, balance, and cost. They have added the video here. We can quickly see it. So once you go to the cursor, then auto mode, go to edit, you get 3 options. Then you can optimize it based on your requirements. So now what's next? They're working on dynamic tool calling, which is another example where most native tool descriptions are lazily loaded into every prompt. So just like how we did lazy loading MCP tools, it is something more like that, which also reduces the load on the model and improves the harness performance. You can see this keeps common tools like read and edit hot, while less commonly used tools only enter the prompt when the agent actually calls them, which is very good as well. which will also consume less token and reduce the cost for us. And then they have mentioned that the composer model keeps getting better on everyday path, so the lower cost turns stay close to frontier quality without paying frontier prices. One thing to note here, the cursor router is only available today for Teams and the enterprise plans across desktop, web, iOS CLI, and their SDK. So if you are using their Pro plan, you might not be able to use it. One thing that I'm super excited is to try this with the Cursor SDK. I will try to play around with it. And if you're also interested to try out Cursor SDK, I have already created a video on that. You can definitely take a look on that. So did Cursor kill the model router companies? Not really. OpenRouter, LiteLLM, Portkey, and other companies still solve broader problems like provider abstraction, gateways, observability, failovers, and access to hundreds of models. But if we only talk about agentic coding, I think this will actually change the game. When your editor understands the prompt, the code base, and the complexity of the task, and intelligently routes to the model that will do the job, then it becomes a part of the coding experience itself. Now, I am pretty curious to see what other harnesses like Claude Code, Devin, GitHub Copilot also follows the same direction or not. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. So if you found this video helpful, do give it a like and share it with your friends. And thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. I will see you in the next video. Bye.